But they weren't killing her to rob her. They were killing her because they wanted to be adults. And think in terms of what Tara said when they were talking about, because they were talking about killing her. There's messages all over the place. Y'all saw them, I saw them. They were all there.
There was times I could hear things that in the other room and stuff, but I never got up and went and looked to see what was going on, so.
And what could have been just waiting a little longer to be teenagers in love turned into capital murder.
Just break the window and get in. Those were the last instructions Christopher King gave to his father's oldest friend. A simple sentence, 7 words. He didn't know it yet, but he had just authorized a descent into a living nightmare. When Terry Utton finally crawled through a bathroom window into the home of Tammy King, he didn't find a house. He found a fortress. The doors weren't just locked, they were barricaded from the inside. A tumble dryer shoved hard against the back door, a mattress piled on top of it, the front entrance blocked with furniture, windows obscured across every room. This wasn't the chaos of a break-in. This was deliberate, calculated. Someone had worked hard to make sure whatever was inside that house stayed hidden for as long as possible. In one bedroom, Tammy King lay on her back on her bed. Sheets and blankets had been thrown over her, haphazardly, carelessly, like an afterthought. She had a single gunshot wound to the head. Her body had been there for at least a day, possibly longer. But it was the other bedroom, the one that had been lived in after the murder, nested in, hidden in, that would stop investigators cold. Bags of half-eaten Taco Bell rotting on the floor. Prescription pill bottles with Tammy's name on the labels scattered in plain view, and water bottles, dozens of them, filled with human urine. Someone had been living in that room, refusing to leave, refusing to face what they had done in the room next door. And on a phone recovered from that same room, a digital trail of Instagram messages that would rip apart every assumption investigators walked in with. This wasn't a burglary gone wrong. This was a premeditated execution. The suspects? The very granddaughter Tammy King had opened her home to protect, and the boyfriend she had welcomed through her front door out of love for that girl. This is the story of how teenage resentment curdled into obsession, how obsession hardened into a plan, and how that plan, typed out in Instagram messages with smiley faces and the words, "We ride at dawn," ended the life of a woman who had done nothing but love too generously. To understand what happened inside that house on 15th Street in Baycliffe, Galveston County, Texas, you first have to understand Tammy King, 61 years old, a recent widow, a grandmother who, when her granddaughter Tara's home situation became unstable, didn't hesitate for a single moment. She opened her door, she gave the girl a room, she provided structure, safety, and the kind of stubborn, unglamorous love that doesn't ask for anything in return.
Yes. Well, no, I'm just doing the video of you.
Tammy's late husband Butch had run a gun shop. When he passed, much of the inventory transferred to her possession. The house on 15th Street was full of firearms, rifles, handguns, safes stacked with weapons and cash built up over a lifetime. Tammy was sitting on significant assets. But by every account from the people who knew her, that was never the point. The point was family. The point was always Tara. Transaction records would later paint a picture of exactly who Tammy King was as a grandmother. $50 for a new phone case, $30 for takeout. Small, quiet acts of generosity that never made headlines, but told you everything. She was not a perfect woman. She was a frustrated one, a grandmother navigating the particular exhaustion of raising a teenager who was pulling away from her. But she was trying. Every single day, she was trying. The trouble didn't start with Tara alone. It started when Tara found Uriah Urick. Uriah Urick, who went by the nickname Percy, was 18 years old when he entered Tammy King's orbit. He wasn't in school, he wasn't working, he had no driver's license, no vehicle, no visible direction. What he did have was Tara's complete and total devotion, and an increasing amount of time inside Tammy's house. Tammy, characteristically, had welcomed him. She set rules, she imposed a curfew. Uriah was to be out of the house by 10 o'clock each night. She drew the line at him staying over. These were not unreasonable expectations. They were the basic boundaries of a grandmother trying to raise her granddaughter responsibly. But to Uriah and Tara, those boundaries felt like walls. Every curfew was a humiliation. Every rule was evidence that Tammy stood between them and the life they believed they deserved. A life with no oversight, no grandmother watching from the other room, full access to the firearms, the cash, the safes that lined the closets of that house. What Tammy didn't know, what Terry Utton didn't know, even on the nights he heard noises coming from Tara's bedroom after Uriah's curfew had passed and said nothing, was that late at night, those two teenagers were on Instagram, planning. The messages recovered by investigators are genuinely difficult to read, not because they are complex or psychologically sophisticated, but because they are not. They are casual, breezy, punctuated with smiley faces. Two teenagers discussing the murder of a 61-year-old woman the way other teenagers discuss weekend plans. Weeks before Tammy died, Tara wrote to Uriah about an argument she'd had with her grandmother. She had been tempted, she wrote, to confront her, but held back because she knew Uriah would want her gone right away. Uriah's response was chilling in its simplicity. I don't want to kill her if it ruins our lives or isn't on your command. I hate her. Tara wrote about having resisted the urge to shoot her grandmother herself, explaining that she held back only because she worried Uriah would regret it. Then, with a matter-of-factness that prosecutors would later describe to a jury in stunned, quiet tones, she added, I would regret it because I want to kill her. 10 days before Tammy King died, Tara wrote that she had been tempted to stab her grandmother to death. Uriah advised against it. A knife left too much to chance. What if Tammy fought back? Better, he reasoned, to do it together. Let me handle it, he wrote. I disable her, then enable you with a weapon. He ended that message with a smiley face. The messages continued right up to the day Tammy died. Uriah's final text before they acted read simply, We ride at dawn. On February 5th, 2025, Uriah Urick shot Tammy King once in the head with an AR-556 rifle while she lay in her bed. She almost certainly never saw it coming. The gun, one of many that had belonged to her late husband, had been taken from inside her own home. Here is where this case separates itself from other domestic homicides, because after Tammy King was dead, Uriah Urick did not run. He stayed. He and Tara spent time in that house after the murder, filming videos on their phones as they moved through the rooms, packing bags, grabbing guns, pill bottles with Tammy's name on them, and her bank cards. Transaction records would later show a series of attempts to transfer money from Tammy's accounts into Tara's app. First, attempts of $10,000. When those failed, smaller amounts followed. $200, $300, $50. On the morning of February 6th, the day after the murder, one of Tammy's accounts was successfully linked directly to Tara's app. Meanwhile, Uriah had barricaded the house, the tumble dryer against the back door, the mattress piled on top, items pushed against the front entrance, windows blocked. He created a fortress, not to protect himself from the outside world, but seemingly unable to bring himself to leave the inside one. He slept on a makeshift bed under the desk in Tara's room. He urinated into water bottles rather than move freely through the house. He ate takeout and left the wrappers on the floor. He sat in the filth of what he had done, and he stayed. The human psyche is not designed to cross the threshold that Uriah Urick crossed on February 5th, and on the other side of it, he didn't find freedom, he found paralysis, a fortress of his own making, with a dead woman in the room next door. It was that paralysis and the people who loved Tammy King that ultimately broke everything open. Terry Utton had known Tammy for over 40 years. They first met in the 1980s when their spouses were siblings. After decades of friendship, and after both Sandy and Butch passed away, the widow and widower had found something unexpected, each other. In the 6 months before her death, Terry and Tammy had built a quiet, tender happiness together. When Tammy stopped answering her phone, Terry noticed immediately. When a day passed with no reply, then a day and a half, he drove to the house. He knocked. He called out. He beat on windows. Nothing. He reached Tammy's son, Christopher, who had also heard nothing from either his mother or daughter in days. Christopher told Terry to break the door down. The door wouldn't give, so Terry Utton got a picnic table from the yard, positioned it under the bathroom window, and climbed through. He was inside for less than a minute. When the deputies walked around to meet him at the front door, Terry came out distressed, barely able to speak. He had found Tammy in her bedroom. He had not been able to make himself look into Tara's room. He had seen enough. While Tammy lay undiscovered, Tara and Uriah had already begun running. On the afternoon of February 5th, the day after the murder, a friend named Rigo received a phone call from Uriah. He was asked to come to the house and, oddly, to stay on the phone right up until the moment he arrived. When he got there, he was instructed to back into the driveway. The couple loaded items into his trunk, including their small black dog, Salem, and asked him to drive them to a nearby parking lot where another friend, Christian, was working. Christian gave them a place to stay. In exchange, they offered to pay him in cash or guns. They told both Rigo and Christian the same story, that Tammy had been abusive, that they were escaping a dangerous household. They posted on social media asking their network for help fleeing an unhealthy environment. There was never any evidence that Tammy King was anything other than a loving, if frustrated, grandmother. When investigators searched the spare room at Christian's apartment after the couple fled on February 7th, the same day Tammy was found, they found a scene that mirrored Tara's bedroom at home. Bags of takeout, multiple firearms, containers of ammunition, a pill bottle with Tammy's name partially visible on a torn label, and a bathroom destroyed with cut hair and spilled dye, a desperate attempt to alter their appearance before running. 3 days later, Tara King and Uriah Urick were arrested at a Dollar General in Laredo, Texas, 5 hours south of Galveston County, pressing hard toward the Mexican border. They had hitched a ride with a 35-year-old drug dealer named Travis Hodge, paying him in cash and accepting methamphetamine in return. Somewhere along that drive south, Travis began to piece together what they had done. He dropped them at a motel and wanted no further part of it. The guns he was left holding were placed in a storage unit and later retrieved by investigators. One of them, the AR-556, was confirmed to be the weapon used to kill Tammy King. In November 2025, Uriah Urick stood trial for capital murder in Galveston County. The prosecution laid it out plainly. 2 teenagers so consumed by resentment, so intoxicated by their own sense of entitlement, that they murdered the one person who had ever truly provided for them, simply because she asked them to follow rules. The defense argued immaturity, naivety, drug influence, that Uriah was an 18-year-old boy who made the worst decision of his life, not for robbery, but because he and Tara wanted, desperately, to be adults. After 3.5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on capital murder. The conviction carries an automatic life sentence without the possibility of parole. Tara King pleaded not guilty. Her trial was scheduled for January 2026. Tammy King's family wrote that her legacy is one of love, kindness, and strength, that her memory is a source of comfort and inspiration to everyone she left behind. She opened her home. She set her rules. She held her line. She loved a granddaughter who was pulling away and a young man she had welcomed through her door, and she paid for that love with her life. Terry Utton climbed through a bathroom window because he was afraid of what he would find. He was right to be afraid. If you have someone in your life who checks on you, who calls when you don't answer, who shows up when you go quiet, hold on to them. Tammy King had people like that. It just wasn't enough to save her. All details sourced from court records, trial testimony, and verified news reporting. Tara King's trial was pending at time of script publication.